Restoring Peter Burns. We need an extension. You know, like contract extensions happen to where we can do this show all season long. That'd be good.
Yeah.
I'm fine with that. And then, 1,000 retweets, 5,000 retweets, 4? No, you don't think it has a chance of happening? You're not buying it.
I'm not sure that the petition that you're trying to start here.
I think Doring's pretty fired up to get back to Florida as well.
I was going to say, he's
ready.
ready for it. By the way, how about this tweet earlier today from SoundOff13? Tom Rinaldi had an interview with Joe Burrow, and it was on ESPN. And he said, quote, I wanted to go Nebraska, but they told me I wasn't good enough. Now, Nebraska had an opportunity.
Coming out of high school?
Coming out of high school to get him, all right? Because remember, his dad and brother played there. So he, out of high school, had a chance to go to Nebraska. They said he wasn't good enough. And then even in the transfer, after he graduated, had a chance.
They didn't
there.
want him
Scott Frost is like,
to?
nah, we're good. Obviously, yada, 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 worked out pretty good. A guy that knows it firsthand is Jacob Hester there in Baton Rouge joining us. All right, before we get into Burrow, you were on the team plane after they won the SEC championship game. How was it?
It was outstanding, as you can imagine. Look, these guys are fired up to win the SEC championship, and through this process, you know, there's a lot of people on this football team, as y'all well know, that still have a chip on their shoulder. You mentioned Joe Burrow in Nebraska. I mean, that's something that he lives by. Every time I talk to Clyde Edwards-Helaire or Justin Jefferson or somebody on this team that's a star, they think that they've been doubted throughout their career. So to be able to celebrate an SEC championship, it was really fun. But this team still knows that they have their goals in front of them, and they kind of refocused there as you get back to Baton Rouge. This week will be a little bit light work. You'll almost be on the award circuit, right, with Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and those guys. And so a little bit time to relax, but this team doesn't celebrate too long any victory.
Hester, I thought it was interesting because it was a very different sound from the camp at Ohio State versus the camp at LSU. You heard Ryan Day talking a lot about them being the number one team. They were deserving of it, where Coach O's message was, hey, we'll play anybody, anywhere, anytime. When it's all said and done behind the scenes, how happy do you think LSU was in that locker room about being named the number one seed and avoiding Clemson at the 3 spot?
Look, I'll be honest with you, and this isn't lip service. I mean, that's just kind of the mentality. And it starts at the top with Coach O. I mean, we heard his comments after the game. I mean, this man would fight a grizzly bear in a cage for LSU. And by the way, I'd favor Coach O in that matchup. But it just trickles down, right? It trickles from Coach O to Steve Ensminger and Dave Aranda. And then it goes to your players. And Joe Burrow's got that mentality. Look, y'all have been around the young man. I mean, he is ready to go no matter what team it is. He said he'll play in Canada. He'll play on a gravel surface. He doesn't really care. But that has to come from the top, right? That can't be fake. That can't just be put into place. It has to be Coach O, and then it trickles down to the bottom.
Jacob, last year in College Station, I called the last loss that LSU had, that 7 overtime game.
Thanks, loser.
In College Station, the highest scoring game ever. And I think at that time we were all so impressed with Burrow and how hard he fought, but we also thought, man, this offense needs to have a new identity. You and I were eating some lunch in the press box before the spring game, and I was blown away by what we saw that day in April. And I thought, man, if they're committed to this offense, LSU could be one of the best teams in the country. Did you really believe when we watched that in April that this is what you would get this year?
Well, look, I think it's fair to say that LSU has been wanting to change this offense for a long time, and we heard that they were going to change it for a long time. But it never really happened. But you go back to that A&M game that you mentioned, you could see what they wanted to be. You could look at that game and you saw Joe running, you saw them throw for more yards, you saw them open it up a little bit. Then it kind of rolled into that Fiesta Bowl against USC. And regardless of what you think of Central Florida, that was a team that at that point hadn't lost in 2 years, and LSU had offensive success in that matchup. And then you're right, we were sitting there thinking, okay, Joe Brady's here. We know they want to be this offense. This is a spring game. Is this really going to continue? And then you saw it in August. You saw it in the fall scrimmages there. But you're like, okay, is this going to continue? When times get tough, are they going to revert back to what they did for over a decade? That was impressive that they didn't do that. You look at the game at Texas in Austin. In those situations, 3rd and 17, which I still think is one of the biggest plays of the year. 9 times out of 10 in the last decade, LSU runs that football, and the most creative thing they would have done was maybe a screen to the running back. No, they go after it. They throw an 18-yard dig route to Justin Jefferson. It goes for a touchdown. That's the dagger. And so from that moment on, okay, I knew This is different. There's no 4-minute offense in this LSU offense. They are going to step on people's throats, and they've done it all year long.
And that's why they've been breaking records, and Joe Burrow is going to win the Heisman coming up this week. One of the reasons why Joe Brady added with Steve Ensminger to this great little gumbo and jambalaya recipe they have for the offense. What's the future of Joe Brady with the LSU Tigers?
Well, look, as we all know, it's an open locker room for the SEC championship game, and I think Joe Brady got maybe a step and a half outside of the dressing room before he was stopped by about 30 reporters because they want to know the same thing. And look, he loves LSU. He loves South Louisiana. And there's, something about that, right? He spent time with the Saints. He's been at LSU now. And they asked him where he was going to be next year, and he said LSU. Now, that contract, fellas, is not going to look the same. There might be a couple of 18-wheelers that back up here to the football facility to make sure that he gets paid. But, look, LSU wants him here. It seems like he wants to be here. In my opinion, unless he wants to be an NFL guy, which he might be, if he wants to be a head coach, those would be reasons he would leave LSU. He's not leaving LSU with the talent they have here to go be an offensive coordinator anywhere else in the country.
Hester, the story of the season has been the consistency on the offense. Unfortunately, the defense was not that same model of consistency, but we've seen them now hold Texas A&M to 169 total yards of offense and back that up with a great performance that only allowed Georgia to score 10 points. What has been the impetus for change on that side of the ball, in your opinion?
Well, first off, I think they got embarrassed by Ole Miss. I mean, in that second half, they heard the national narrative that they weren't a good defense, and that was the reason they weren't the number one team in the country. And it got after them a little bit, right? You saw the difference in practice. But also, look, K'Lavon Chaisson, Rashard Lawrence, and Grant Delpit have all been injured in different times. They had not really played together healthy yet until the Texas A&M game. And also, the Arkansas game did something for LSU's defense when Grant Delpit missed it. It allowed Mo Hampton, a freshman safety, to kind of show that he could handle playing in the SEC championship game and beyond. And so when you have Mo Hampton step up at that deep safety position, it allows you to be more creative with Jacoby Stevens and Grant Delpit. They can be closer to the line of scrimmage. They can do some different things. And so the last 3 weeks have been really, really good for this LSU defense to get their confidence back, to see who they wanted to be, because Grant Delpit has not really been healthy all season long until he sat out that game, got a little bit more healthy, and now you're having your stars all play well together.
All right, I'm calling it. Oklahoma doesn't have a chance. LSU is going to blow them out in Atlanta. What, if anything, Jacob, concerns you about the Sooners? And if I'm right, who would you rather play when LSU hosts Ohio State or Clemson in the national championship game?
Well, look, Oklahoma is a good football team, and I think the world of Jalen Hurts, just covering him at his time at Alabama here within the SEC. Going to try to do what John Rice Plumlee and Ole Miss did, because Jalen Hurts has running ability. We all know that. And so LSU has to be able to stop that. Oklahoma's got really good receivers. And so Derek Stingley, you've shown up every time that you've been asked to show up. Can you show up yet again? My money's always going to be on Derek Stingley for what he did in Atlanta the other day. I mean, we're talking about he might be the best cornerback in all of football as a true freshman. And so there's going to be challenges there, right? But I do agree. I do think LSU gets past Oklahoma. And then, man, what a story it would be for Joe Burrow to face off against Ohio State in New Orleans, in Louisiana. Look, we played Ohio State in 2007 in a national championship game. So all those storylines would kind of come together. Now, the Clemson Tigers, as we all know, they'll be ready to play as well.
Hester, I think it's interesting as you get into this portion of the season, you can't rest on your laurels. You got to continue to get better. So if the coaching staff takes a look at themselves with a critical eye, I know they have Tell the Truth Monday. What thing are they looking at that they know they have to improve upon the most as they get ready for Oklahoma and then beyond?
That was actually a really good question. I think Taylor and I looked at each other
surprised?
like, oh, look at my man asking a question. Well done, Chris.
All grossed up here.
Yeah, week 15 finally got one done.
Hey, there we go. Look, obviously defensively, you're still not perfect. You still want to find a way to create a pass rush against the quarterback. That's probably the one thing that they'll try to improve on. And offensively, as good as this offense has been, I guess the one thing that you would try to fix is get touchdowns when you have that chance, when you have that opportunity, when you're in the red area. Convert on short yardage situations. Sometimes that's been a little troublesome for LSU. Also, you don't want to settle for field goals. You want touchdowns. But I'll be honest with you, CD, how can you look at this LSU offense and be critical of it? Now, those are the minor things I think they want to work on. But what we saw Saturday against that Georgia defense, I mean, they could have scored 50 points if they don't settle for field goals there. So I guess if you look at the red area against Auburn, against Georgia, get touchdowns, not field goals, would be the one thing they'll work on.
Yeah, you can bring a knife to a knife to a gunfight, and that's kind of what the college football playoffs are going to be. All right, if you're outside of being an Oklahoma fan, Ohio State fan, Clemson fan, I feel like the rest of the country is an LSU fan for a bevy of different reasons. You and I got to spend some time on the sidelines with an LSU fan as well, too. We run into, of all people, Vince Vaughn on the sidelines. Now, we got a little photo bomb with him, and Chris was like, it didn't look like Vince wanted to talk to you guys, but he knows you a little bit. How did you guys develop a relationship, and how big of a college football fan has he become?
Well, first off, I didn't know that he was going to be in that photo. So my wife said, hey, who you watching the game with on the sideline? I was like, oh, PB. And so I sent a picture of me and PB. It just so happens that Vince Vaughn is totally judging us for our selfie. But it's okay.
Judging, looking.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know if I believe that story, Hester. You framed that thing up perfectly with Vince Vaughn in the background.
I would have screamed, hot route,
Hey,
red 7.
It's a true story, I promise you, because Vince is great. Like you mentioned, we created a relationship 2 years ago. He came to watch LSU, Alabama, and the guy knows football. Mm-hmm. Like, he was on the sideline. PB, you were there. He was asking about coverages. He started talking about cover 2 man and quarters coverage. I'm like, wait a minute. Vince Vaughn knows quarters coverage? What are we doing here? But no, he's a big football fan. He always films in New Orleans, and so I guess that's where the LSU sort of fandom came from. But hey, Vince, don't be photobombing our picture. We're talking to our wives.
Man, I tell you what. You know what happened? We got him escorted off the field after he did that. That's what. Seriously, he did not have an actual field credential. To credit to the officials down there for security, they're like, "Hey, man, I don't care who you are."
Rule number 1.
Right. Rule number 1. And Hester, to his credit, Vince was like, well, okay, just a really overall cool guy. It's been a cool story here for the LSU Tigers. You've been doing a great job covering it. We'll talk to you soon, bud.
All right, sounds good, fellas. Hey, I'm a little upset I didn't see Doring's Schmedium shirt that I've been hearing about all morning.
Look at this thing,
it is
man.
tight.
This is
seriously.
tight.
You know how we roll here, Come on, man.
That's right,
Workouts
CD. I
right
got
after the show. Got to try to show off the physique, right?
Yeah, you're not going to go visit Tommy Moffitt, my friend. All right, later, Jacob Hester. All right, Peter Burns, Taylor Zarzour, Chris Doering. Let's